Greetings, everyone. Welcome to our exclusive Global Leading Voices webinar campaign. We are delighted to have you join us here today. Please be informed that if you have any questions during the presentation, you may type them into the question box in your control panel. The presenter will answer your questions at the end of the presentation accordingly. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to our presenter, who will begin shortly.
Good afternoon. My name is Nico Snyman. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Crest Advisory Africa. We are based in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and I'm going to be leading you this afternoon under the topic, the impact of security operations management in and on enterprise risk management. I'm going to be addressing firstly who I am, some definitions, internal and external stakeholders that one is working with, whether you are in the security operations management area, environment, or in the enterprise risk management area. And then I'm going to be addressing two case studies of experience that I had over the last 2 years. The human rights and ERM, the use of force, subcontractor management, and anti-corruption, and then internal audit and security environment, and then I will hand over for questions. Just a quick overview of myself. I was a policeman in the South African police for about 25 years, serving in the pre-apartheid as well as in the post-apartheid era. I was based in the intelligence services with covert operations from 1986 till 1998. And in 1998, I was appointed as a brigadier. It is a senior rank in the police in Midlands area of Soweto. Now, Midlands in Soweto is a black community. I am a white policeman, so for a white policeman to be working in a black community as a stakeholder, that has got its own challenges. And so I was part and parcel of the overt policing environment, and I was managing a community of over 500,000 people that were living in my environment. Secondly, in 2007, I was appointed as the executive risk and security manager for the Voluntary project. Now, the Voluntary project was at that time one of the biggest projects globally between the time period of 2007 and 2011. And in 2009, I was appointed for the Voluntary to be on a shared basis between the construction and the to set up the operation systems for the rapid transport system, and to get everything in place for the opening 2 days prior to the World Cup of 2010. And I was there until 2013, where I was the enterprise risk manager and responsible for the security environment. In 2014, I established Crest Advisory Africa, and we're specializing in risk management, specifically on the ISO standards, and in partnership with the PCB based on ISO 31000, internal audit ISO 19011, compliance ISO 19600, business continuity ISO 22301, and quality, that is ISO 9001. Just three definitions that I want to go through at this time is, in terms of ISO 18788, security is defined as the condition of being protected against hazards, threats, and risks, and or loss. Now that is, if one is looking at a security environment, you need to be looking at hazards, threats, risks, and loss. And that has to do with specifically assets, human life, and anything that is internally and externally part and parcel of the security mandate. Secondly, if you're looking at risk, the definition of risk as defined in ISO 73, as well as in ISO 31000, it is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. Now, that is a very simple definition of risk, and it is giving you a very nice focus on the objectives. If you take it back to the security environment, it has got a specific objective of protecting the assets of the company, the people of the company, and everything in terms of that. And then objectives in terms of ISO 18788 is defined as the result to be achieved. Now, every result in a security environment, whether it is internal threats, whether it is external threats, whether it is internal vulnerabilities or external vulnerabilities, that can have a major impact on and consequence on the business as an entity and on the risk management as a whole. Now, if we're looking at that specifically, and we are correlating that into the business environment, a security structure is usually not part and parcel of the operations or maintenance or the core business. Security is usually a support system to the core business in any environment. So security supports business. Security needs to be aligned with business. Security's objectives need to be aligned with what the business drives to achieve in the environment, whether it is within a transporting environment, whether it is in a logistical environment, whether it is in an aviation environment, mining environment, it does not matter. Security is there to support business. But if security goes wrong, it can have huge impact on the reputation of the business, on the operations of the business. It can have a definite financial effect, and specifically it will have a legal and a legal impact that you are going to be busy in liability processes for a long time. I want to address as well the internal and the external environments, specifically on ISO 73, just to set the basis there. Now, an internal environment in which the organization seeks to achieve its objectives, that has to do with, firstly, governance, organizational structure, roles and accountabilities, policies, objectives, and the strategies that is in place to achieve them, the capabilities, and I will speak about that a bit later, the capabilities of the resources that one has got, and that is to do with the knowledge, or to do with the capital, time, people, the processes, systems, and technologies, information systems, information flows, and decision-making processes, both formal and informal, and both in a normal environment as well as in an abnormal environment. The relationships with and perceptions and values of internal stakeholders, and this is a fairly sensitive one if one is looking from a security perspective, but you don't understand the enterprise risk environmental experience. And then lastly, the organizational culture that exists in that specific environment. External context on ISO 73 explains the external environment in which the organization seeks to achieve its objectives. Now, that has to do with the cultural, social, the political, the legal, the financial, technological, whether it is on a national, regional, or a local environment. So that is fairly big, and we are speaking there about various models. One of them is the PESTEL model. The second one is the key drivers and trends having impact on the objectives of the organization. And for that, one needs to have an analysis of the key drivers and the trends. And thirdly, the relationships with and the perceptions and values of external stakeholders. Now, that is a fairly difficult one to pinpoint and to assess. But if one has got the correct information flows and structures that you can consult, one can get the perceptions and values of them. I want to introduce you to to two case studies that I've been in, that has been happening over the last 2 to 3 years, and that I was involved in after the fact, to go and assess various the stakeholder environment, the security environment versus the enterprise risk environment. And if we look at the first one on your left hand side, with the security person that is standing there at an open groove mine in Tanzania, and on your right hand side you will see the policing environment there and people lying on the ground. This is an actual environment that has actually caused 36 people to be killed. On the left hand side it is about 67 people killed and 200 and something people that were injured over about 12 months. And the effect of that on the comments at the bottom of the slide has to do with the killings at the mine. In 2011 and 2013, several villagers who entered the mine area looking for gold were killed by police officers assigned to support the mine security guards. Now, I just want to stop there. This mine on the left-hand side is based in Tanzania. It is an open groove mine. It is a gold mine. Really, it is a gold mine. It is mining gold. And the open groove mine is in the village of a very poor village. Now, the mining company that has been working there were not looking at the security operations as a critical factor for them to actually operate at that mine itself. And during the operations, the villagers were actually mining next to the mining personnel. So when the mining personnel were given an instruction of there's a blast that is going to be happening, the community members did not know about it. And through that non-communication and stakeholder management that was extremely poor, people lost their lives, firstly, and a lot of people were injured. And the court case that was then implemented caused the mine to reconsider, to actually escalate their security operations management from a very low level on the risk profile of the company to actually #1 at all the mines within the specific country. Now, I will get back to that one a bit later. Clashes with stakeholders. As I was speaking there, the Marikana mine in South Africa, what happened there was people were striking, and they were striking for normal things. It is a normal negotiation process in South Africa or Southern Africa to strike and to demand wages, to demand benefits, etc. And that whole strike escalated out of the environment of the control of the security environment. The enterprise risk structure were not managing that well. The communication structure were not managing that well at all, and they brought in the police services. And with this tension that was coming in, the clashes happened, and there were a lot of killings, and that has actually made the whole platinum mine industry to actually fall in turnover within days. The North Mara mine in Tanzania, the one that I was speaking about just earlier, the clashes were not only within the open groove mine. It was also at the dumping site on a mine where you are dumping all the discarded ground and rocks. And this is where the community were actually scavenging for the gold dust and for gold particles that they could salvage because they are poor. Now you've got the rich in the mine, and you've got the poor that is in the village, and that environment of not understanding your external environment. And there was, at that time, there was no stakeholder analysis done. There was no stakeholder communication done. There was very limited interaction between the mine and the community itself. And actually, if you're looking at the stakeholders were actually owning the property there, but they were totally excluded out of the profits, out of everything else. And the deaths that occurred there was published in various newspapers. So this is open communication. It is not some communication that I am only privileged to. It is open communication that you can go and look at in any newspaper that publish that. The third one that I want to be addressing there just briefly is hospitals. Hospitals are vulnerable. Hospitals are vulnerable places where people that is sick are coming in, and if the security, and usually the security is not very good at the hospitals because people are rushing in there. We've been conducting risk assessments from a security point of view, as well as from an enterprise risk management point of view, over a few hospitals in Southern Africa, and where gang fights occurred in the community. That external stakeholder is then, the victim is then brought to the hospital, and with everything that is happening, firstly, the emergency services that is now responding to the security, the criminal incident in the community are under pressure and are under attack. And then when that person is then taken to either the hospital, intensive care, or anywhere else, they are then actually forcing themselves into the operating rooms, firstly, secondly, the ICU, and putting everybody in the hospital in danger. In the Barrick case in Tanzania, there was a commercial ban placed on exports. I conducted the audit in 2016, and what the situation at that time was that expats, mostly expats, were working on the mine, and they only had the localization process of the people were limited, and it was a process that was not enforced. It was as you go along, please implement the localization process itself. Now, I was there in 2016, and in April of 2017, the president of Tanzania put a commercial export ban on all the gold concentrate out of Tanzania. Now, immediately, Barrick Gold has got 3 mines in Tanzania: North Mara, Bulyanhulu, and another one in the middle of Tanzania. All 3 mines are sitting with, firstly, and because of the reputational impact that a bad security structure had, that had a knock-on effect specifically on the operations. The operations is now affecting the financial, having a financial consequence. And the question is, will Barrick see out this year in Tanzania, or are they going to be closing down? If they are going to be surviving this year, the chances are good that they are getting funding from somewhere else. Marikana, if you look at the Marikana incident, the violent scenes at the Lonmin Marikana mine could shake investor confidence. That has happened specifically, and that has resulted in 18% decrease in share prices, and that is billions of US dollars lost for the mine, as well as the knock-on effect of that is that people has lost their work. They were a retrenchment process, they were a restructuring process, and because of the poor management of the external stakeholders, where if you're looking at the security operations management, you are looking at the incidents that are reported, you're looking at intelligence that you are gathering within the community, you are looking at the stakeholder engagement on an external basis, that you can actually gather information to have preemptive and proactive information for the decision makers to make decisions about what is going to happen, and not to wait and see what is happening, and then to be in a reactive state, that you're working on a security process or implement security procedures that is actually in an emergency environment. It is always going to go wrong. Now, if you're looking at a security environment, that is a huge cost to a company, because you're looking at resources, that is people, you're looking at processes, you're looking at technology. Technology is costing the integration of access control, of CCTV systems, of every system that you are actually working with, to make sure that you are looking after the people and the assets of the company, is costing a bundle. And if you don't use that optimally, you are going to sit with a very unstable risk environment, that if business is only looking at security as a support system to call in if and when needed, the risk management process are then going to be failing. The effect of this is human rights. Now, I'm going to address two things: human rights and the use of force. Firstly, human rights is entrenched in every environment that we are engaging in, whether it is in aviation, whether it is in the banking environment, whether it is in the transport, logistics, vehicle environment. Human rights are everywhere, and the forerunner of human rights, to make sure that human rights are being complied with, is the security structure within an entity. Now, there are voluntary principles on voluntary security principles for human rights that one can start implementing. But just to get back to the human rights issue, it is to establish and maintain a transparent governance and management framework in order to deter, detect, monitor, address, and prevent the occurrence and reoccurrence of incidents that have adverse impacts on human rights and fundamental freedoms. Secondly, identify and operate in accordance with applicable international, national, and local laws and regulations. That is a big statement, because it is not only in your own environment, you must also look further and past your own environment. Thirdly, conduct comprehensive internal and internal risk assessments associated with safety, security, and human rights risks. Now, I can guarantee you that if one is taking a population in an enterprise risk environment, where, as I was saying, let's use the banking, the aviation, the transport and logistics. I haven't seen, at 80% of those places, I haven't seen a comprehensive internal and external risk assessment done on the human rights. Fourthly, implement risk control measures that support the rule of law, respect human rights of stakeholders, and protect the interests of the organization and its clients, and provide professional services. That's a tall order. And if every one of those controls are being measured against the control effectiveness of the rule of law, the respect of human rights of the stakeholders, and to protect the interests of the organization, I think enterprise risk management should take this as a very serious indicator of how strong the security operations management are actually working or not working. The next point is ensure suitable and sufficient operational controls based on identified risks are implemented and managed to enhance the occupational health and safety and the welfare of persons working on behalf of the organization. Now, this is the interface and dependency and interdependency that we are speaking about, the operational functionaries, which is the security operations management as well as safety operations management. And usually in some organizations, health and safety and security are in the same portfolio. So if one is looking at those suitable and sufficient operational controls in those environments, occupational health and safety, I haven't seen a human rights risk assessment done. I've seen a lot of others, but not on the human rights. Effectively, with public and private stakeholders, communicate and consult. This is where the wheels come off, specifically in the security environment. Security environment is easily addressing the internal control environment as well as the internal stakeholders, but they don't want to engage, or they are engaging as a spectator with the public and the private stakeholders. And in the case of Barrick in Tanzania, what they have done there is that they have actually seconded the communications officers that has got nothing to do with either health or safety or security to actually go and consult and communicate with the public and private stakeholders. Now, this is immediately a disconnect. This is a disconnect between what is the expectations, what decisions one is making on the stakeholders and for the stakeholders, and that creates a huge gap that neither party are actually getting closer to each other. It is that you are working through a conduit, and that conduit is actually not addressing or can make decisions on the spot, on the go, and has first-hand information that can actually make sure that a relationship is built with the stakeholders. And then conduct effective screening and training of persons working on the organization's behalf. Now, effective screening and training. Screening, pre-employment screening as well as in-employment screening is extremely important. Now, I've been working with companies that is being categorized as national key points. That is the international airports, as well as the energy suppliers of countries. We're talking about the Central Reserve Bank, and what we have seen there is that firstly, screening is done possibly once, just before employment. In-employment screening is not happening, and it is not happening because of processes, but also because people don't understand the internal risk environment and the threat to the insider within the organization that can actually take out information that can affect the reputation, operations, and the legal environment. And the training on that is also very important. Then go over to the next slide, is to ensure that the use of force is reasonably necessary and proportional and lawful. Now, we conducted an audit about 2 weeks ago at a mining environment where there was also a stoppage of work, a strike, and the security in that environment were actually with the presence of some of the security tools and equipment were actually creating an unstable environment, and the use of force immediately escalated from a standing position to shoot, not to kill, but to shoot, and they have killed 2 to 3 people, and they have injured a number. And the question there is, proportionality. If your life is not in danger and you are sitting with a bulletproof vest, etc., and you are fully weaponized, and the person that is opposing you, if there is not a direct threat on your life, proportionality can be is very difficult to explain then, and then it makes it unlawful. Conduct performance evaluations of services rendered and the achievement of objectives. The performance evaluations need to be aligned with the human rights. The performance evaluation need to be aligned with every deliverable in the human rights spectrum, as it is stated here, but also as it is actually taken out of ISO 18788. That is the Security Operations Management System that was published in 2015. And then develop and implement systems for reporting and investigating allegations of violations of international law, local law, or human rights, as well as mitigating and remedying the consequences of undesirable or disruptive events. Reporting and investigating. Firstly, on reporting. It is a big requirement within ISO 31000. If you look at clause 5.7 of ISO 31000, that the recording and reporting of incidents is extremely important, whether you are in an environmental environment, whether you are in an HR environment, whether you are in a security environment, a safety environment. The recording and the reporting of those incidents is of extreme importance, and with the investigation of it, it is then also looking at the cause and effect to understand what is causing it, that you can continuously improve and to make sure that what you are doing is not going to repeat itself in the future. And if there's any violations or allegations of violations within the legal environment, that is addressed, and that you are going back again to the training and the awareness of the total environment, and that includes your internal stakeholders as well as your external stakeholders. If you're looking at the 7 indicators of voluntary principles on security and human rights, you will see there that one is looking at labor and working conditions. This is what we are auditing in terms of the VRS HR. The second one is indigenous people, localization. Now, if you're going into Africa and you are working on a mine, the chances is about 80% that either it is owned by a global company, and that the localization is only on certain levels, and all the other levels of the organization are then occupied by either expats or people that has been earmarked specifically for those positions. The third indicator is economic, social, and cultural rights. Now, this is where the human rights are coming in, and this is where the respect of your stakeholders and within your internal and external stakeholders need to be balanced. The fourth one is environment and health and safety. That is a standard across the world, that is mandatory and not an elective. So that needs to be implemented, and that needs to be measured on the forefront, and making sure that the environment is set and it is conducive for a good health and safety environment. The fifth one is land rights. Land rights specifically linked to the indigenous people, is that land rights are rights that needs to be assessed, and one needs to respect that. Most of the mining environments has to do with some kind of land rights that you are working within, and that there is either a chief or some kind of structure within your external stakeholder environment that you need to consult with, that you need to work with, that you need to incorporate with. Number 6 is back again to the security. The security not only of the operations within the mine, but also the security of your stakeholders, the security of your your working environment, of your economic and social and cultural rights, and working specifically with health and safety. Because if that is not incorporated, and if these 7 pillars are not working together in tandem and working in silos, it is not having the correct effect. And then lastly, number 7, anti-corruption. Now, anti-corruption and bribery, also one of the ISO standards, 37001, is extremely important, because within the localization process, you need to make provision for the buying of certain provisions or certain goods and services from the local community, to make sure that your labor and working conditions for everybody, as well as your economic, social, and cultural rights, are being protected with an anti-corruption process, that you are in charge of it, and that is not affecting the enterprise risk environment. And this has to do with specifically with security and human rights. Now, this is a fantastic process to actually have and to market oneself to say that human rights is in the forefront of one's business, and one is looking with specific attention to that. If we go over to the recommendations, firstly, due diligence. Due diligence is extremely important to develop the supplier code of ethics. Secondly, investigate and audit of the contractors. That needs to be done on each and every level. Dismissing contractors who fail to comply with the policies or the law, that is the reporting and the incidents, and the risk assessment in the supply chain. Now, this is where ISO 18788, ISO 31000, and ISO 28000 is taking hands and looking at the security in the supply chain for anti-corruption or no bribery activities. Environmental monitoring, along with policies, procedures, and a management system that includes audits and assessments, and the enhanced human resources policies, procedures, and training related to sexual harassment and discrimination more generally. I want to touch on the use of force. Security are usually, if you are looking at security all over the world, whether it is at an airport, in transit, if it is at a bank, security are trained to protect the assets and the people. That is their most important job. Now, if one is looking at the process of the escalation of force, the escalation of force, as in this diagram, it has got various levels that one needs to address. And on the left-hand side, one can see there it is a compliant structure. Then secondly, it is a passive or a resistant structure, an active and a resistant activity, then assaultive, and that is causing bodily harm, and then assaultive, serious bodily harm, and that can go over into deaths. And that is to do with your lethal environment, harmful, etc. And on the next page, you will see that this is the various 6 levels of defense and the controls that is being implemented as a standard globally, to say, step 1, the officer's presence in the uniform must have some kind of assurance to say that the officer's presence need to be respected. Secondly, the verbal commands, if it is escalating and not respected, the second description there is verbal commands and cooperative controls. And the defense and the control techniques there is a whole list that has to do with the compliance, the pressure points, and the control tactics, escort techniques that is specifically to do with the protection of people, the protection of assets in transit, and then to go over into the force option number 3, with the description of empty hand submission techniques, and that is to do with the pressure point control tactics, techniques, a level of force that has a low probability of causing soft connective tissue damage or bone fractures. So you can see immediately, if you're looking at the use of force has got a direct impact on the consequences on a legal and on a legal environment. It will have definitely, it will reach the newspapers, and a reputational risk is evident. If you go over to force option number 4, it is hard control techniques or aggressive response techniques. Now you can see there it is described there with pepper spray and with anything to do with to irritate the skin, the eyes, and mucus. It has got everything as well to do with level 5 of the environment. And then we are going over to level 5, intermediate weapons, an amount of force that would have a high probability of causing soft connecting tissue damage or bone fractures. That will definitely land in the reputational damage or consequence for a company, firstly, and secondly, there will be legal action taken there. And then going over to the lethal force, that is the basis of the 2 case studies that I was discussing there. The legal force or deadly force with high probability of causing death or serious bodily harm and injury. You don't want to have that, because that is going to be keeping you as a risk manager, as a security manager, as a safety manager. That's going to keep you so busy in litigation that you are going to have a huge impact on operations itself. I want to speak lastly about the supply chain contracting, because that has for me a direct impact on bribery and anti-corruption, and one needs to look at the relationships between the direct line of the procurement versus what you are doing, and what is your supply chain contractors universe or risk universe that you are working with. And within the system that we are using, it enables you to ask the right questions, and these questions has got a variety of benefits, because you can see 3, 4, 5, 6 levels down to determine what is the next of kin that is involved in the procurement process, what is the business partners that is involved in it, what is the secondary and third level of fronting that one has got, and how one can actually analyze that and get to a well-reporting system that you can with confidence understand what is the value chain that you've got within your environment, within your subcontracting environment, and that you know what is your risk environment. And this is usually to do with the security environment. Now, this impact is tremendously on the enterprise risk environment, because if tender fraud is occurring, it is going to be a question for the risk manager or for the internal auditor or for the CEO to be answering that. If you're looking at competencies and training, now if you're looking at this picture of the PCB, that is firstly looking at competence is the ability to implement knowledge and skills to achieve intended results. That is a mouthful, but that has to be understood in firstly the context. Does the people know the context? Now, on a mine, when you are working with expats, do they know the context? They know the context, what they are working within, but they don't know the context of the internal and external stakeholders. Now, that has to do with specifically knowledge, skills, and the behavioral skills. And with that, the whole combination there, you cannot sit with only one of the dimensions. There are 4 dimensions there that is actually making that a person is competent, and that competency is in the middle of the page there. And research has indicated or shown that knowledge is what you have built over many years through your studies, etc. Skills is in a specific discipline or environment, And behavior is how does the people act? Now, knowledge contributes to this whole competency framework about 10%, skills about 20%, and behavior about 70%. But if you don't know the context that you are working in, you are not going to be doing it correctly. Then lastly, the last slide is how do you conduct internal audit, and how does the internal audit environment addresses security operations specifically? Now, if an internal auditor that is following policies and procedures, and the policies and procedures of a security operations are written badly, what can he audit? He doesn't know the specific context of the security environment, specifically to do with the critical competence on security, and then the need to know for an internal auditor, or for an internal auditor that is auditing the security operations, the technical environment. He has to have knowledge and skills regarding the range of systems available for implementation. The security technology is the fastest growing industry globally, and keep current and relevant. If you are not current and relevant, you are going to audit old technology that is not going to have the correct effects. And then the operational environment, the context, and then there are some security principles that is also policing principles that one needs to audit to determine what is the crime prevention through environmental design, and how is this incorporated in your policies, procedures, and in your structures. How do you work with a zero tolerance approach in line with the human rights and in line with the use of force continuum? And how do you apply the broken window principle, and how does an internal auditor, which hasn't got these kind of auditing skills, is not going to understand the security environment, and the result of his audit is not going to be valid. I hand over to you, Audit.
Thank you, Nico, for this great presentation. I want to inform you that PCB provides training and certification services for ISO 31000 Introduction, Foundation, Risk Manager, and Lead Risk Manager. A PCB certificate will exemplify your dedication in implementing and managing the risk management processes, and most importantly, you will be recognized worldwide. Now, we'll go ahead and take some time to answer some of the questions from the attendees. The first question is risk management regarded by everyone as essential for the achievement of objectives?
Adrian, are there other people on the panel?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Did you hear the question from the attendee?
Yes, I did. I would say, if you don't have objectives, where do you work to? I've been auditing over the last 10 years, and the first question that I am asking people that I'm going into an environment is, what is the objectives? Because the objectives are linked to a strategy. A strategy is linked to a mission and a vision. And if the organization is driving objectives, then everything that is affecting, that has got an effect on and creating uncertainty on the objectives, that needs to be addressed as a risk, whether it is positive or negative. And that has to be measured in terms of consequences and likelihood. So if you don't have objectives, and everybody has got, whether they are in a company or they are in a personal capacity, they have got objectives. You must just be in a position to formulate that. Just to give you an example, one of the companies that I am auditing now, they had objectives, but they have put it as a bench document away for about a year. And the whole structure of about 80, 90 people were running around headless. They don't know where are they going to. And the simple 4 objectives that they had, that we brought out in October, November of last year, has caused direction, it has caused a purpose, it has caused a measurement that we can actually determine the level of risk as well as the level of assurance. and that we can understand precisely what are we doing and what do we do to drive the objectives to create a conducive environment for that company to be working in. So my answer is definitely. There has to be objectives.
Thank you, Nico. Now, to add to that question is another related question. Is risk management viewed by management as an integral part of management and their responsibilities?
I think that depends on the maturity of the company. If a company is not mature enough to understand that risk management is actually part and parcel of strategic management, then they are not going to see risk management as an integral part of the organizational business, as well as the driving of the objectives. If one is looking at the integration of risk management, one needs to look at SOX compliance. You need to look at King 4 compliance. You need to look at other compliance structures now as well. And if you're looking at the ISO systems or ISO standards, ISO 9001 on quality management, it is now a risk-based approach. If you're looking at environmental management, 14001, it is a risk-based approach. If you're looking at 18,000 that went over into 45,001, it is a risk-based approach. So everything is starting to be linked to risk, and risk is linked to objectives, and objectives is linked to strategy, vision, and mission.
Thank you, Nico. Now, because of the time limitation, we will only answer one more question, and the rest of the questions will be answered by email by Nico. The last question is, can organizations adopt ILO human rights conventions for their operations?
The question that I would answer back is, if one is looking at the standards and the structures for the adopting of the human rights, it needs to be aligned with the practical application within that specific country and within the specific laws and regulations of that specific country. So if there is some kind of second level or third level on the three lines of defense process of independence in the evaluation of the ILO adopting of the human rights and the evaluation and the reporting on it and the continuous improvement of that, then I would say that you've got a mitigation process and a risk treatment plan, because you are managing risk, whether it is a human rights risk or any other kind of risk. You need to treat it as a risk, and the human rights that is applicable in that specific country needs to be assessed and needs to be evaluated. And if you're doing it independently, I would say that you've got an answer there for yourself.
Thank you, Nico, again for this great presentation, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. I would like to let you know that this webinar will be recorded and posted on our website as well as our YouTube channel together with the slides of the presentation. Also, since we were talking about risk management, I would like to remind you that PCB is continuing with its efforts to establish PCB University, which will offer MBA and graduate certificate programs. Among the list of program offerings, we will also offer a graduate certificate in risk management. Currently, we're awaiting institutional license, but we believe that we will be able to follow up with the news on our operating status by the beginning of the second half of 2018. For this and more information, you can contact us at university@pcb.com or visit our website www.pcb.com. Thank you all and have a great day.